Today I'm referencing what's called the Gospel of Thomas, or the Book of Thomas, that was unearthed in 1946 in Qumran, Egypt, in a place called Nag Hammadi, part of what is called the Nag Hammadi Library. That was a whole collection of very large jars of rolls of teachings that were deposited there probably about 17 or 1800 years ago as a perceived necessary action to protect them. Because in the year 325 of the Common Era, there was an action in Nicaea of all of the groups of this new birthing of Christianity, of people coming together, priests and bishops and so forth, and they decided what the official doctrine was going to be of Christianity for the world, because it was growing and getting stronger, and people were attracted to the message of freedom within that message. And so, as the mind will do, it needed to construct a parameter around that way for various purposes. To establish a tradition, to establish a way of perceiving by the powers that be, hopefully also under the direction of the Spirit. And we see that power of the Spirit within the teachings that have moved and touched and inspired people to overcome for hundreds and hundreds of years. But the Gospel of Thomas was hidden away for probably 1800 years until it was discovered by shepherds in a small cave. These teachings, called the Gospel of Thomas, were basically just sayings. They were not a narrative that painted a picture of the times when Jesus walked the earth, of place and circumstance. They were just sayings. Sayings that evoked within the reader or the scribe knowing. And I was developing my thoughts around this message, and I was thinking about the teachers in my life over the last 45 years that have stimulated knowing within me, or have pointed to direct knowing. People like the Fillmores, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, Paramahansa Yogananda, the great yogi of the heart, who had a great affiliation for the Christ teachings and had a visitation of Jesus at one time when he was deep in the meditation that was born out of Kriya Yoga. Also, Anne Colton, who I studied with many, many years ago, who had an emphasis on what she called the night ministry, which was very interesting to me, because the teachings being involved in that level of knowing were all about what we would receive in dreams. And my dream life was powerfully activated at that time to move towards divine remembrance, to know. Others that promoted and examined life, Joel Goldsmith, Emma Curtis Hopkins, who was the minister who ordained the Fillmores, and Dr. Carl Gustav Jung, the father of analytical psychology, who was all about having a deep, examined life so that you and I and all of these people, including the Gospel of Thomas, all geared towards and were advocates of us not being pulled along and tethered by the images of the world. They were all advocates of saying, you are more than your mind, you are more than your world, to go deeper within the self, to be a witness. I was sharing some time with somebody this past week, and they were saying, I know that I'm progressing in my life because I'm becoming the witness. I'm becoming the watcher of my life. And so it's very important for me, I know, my mission and my function with you and with anyone else that I'm in conversation with is that we cultivate a life of being a witness and a watcher of our life experience. And I know that this has to do with direct knowing. That when we come together in this kind of a situation, this isn't just about worship and devotion. This is about cultivating in you a direct knowing of who it is that you are. Our signage out here says now that this is a center for awakening. It really always has been. A center of celebration, a center of enjoyment of each other's process. But it's also about a center of awakening. Awakening to the truth of being that Charles Fillmore talked about. So that as we awaken to the truth of being, and we live within divine remembrance, and we live within the center of the core of being, then our life becomes clarified because of the knowingness of who and what we are. And I've used this example a couple of times here, but it's so poignant in terms of making this illustration. Dr. Carl Gustav Jung had a near-death experience at the age of 76. He was at that time studying the book of Job, and he was writing about, and it was called The Answers to Job, and of which I'm going to use in a class in October. But he was really kind of up against it, and he had a near-death experience, and he, according to his writings, was above the earth, 1,000 miles above the earth. He was witness to the continent of Africa and India, Southeast Asia, and he was in his beingness. And he was at the choice point where he was saying to himself, well, I guess it's time to make my transition to a greater life. And there was a being to his side that came and said, it's not time for you to go yet. You still have work to do. You must go back to the world of boxes. The world of boxes. And that had such a dramatic impact on me that you and I live within the world of boxes and concepts and paradigms and so forth. But that we, through the cultivation of the truth of being, and as we awaken, we become aware. We watch, we witness, and we live from that place. Some faith traditions of the world are not concerned with developing a witness consciousness. They're more concerned with having people adhere to a thought paradigm that they put forth in their teachings. Abide by this and you will have a good life. Abide by this and you will be saved, and so forth. But in unity, the co-founders sat within the silence and they lived from that central place for the rest of their lives after they had healing. And they cultivated within those that came into the unity teachings, the unity vibration, which is really the Christ vibration. And the Christ is a quality of vibration. We point to Jesus the Christ as being, well, that's the exclusive example. And perhaps that is true. But the Christ vibration is a way of life that you and I can allow at any given time. So there was a time, one of the early apostles, Thomas, it is said, wrote down sayings reported to be those sayings of Jesus. And those sayings, it's interesting that researchers and scholars say that at least a half of those teachings that were hidden in a cave for 1,800 years are very close to the teachings within the Synoptic Gospels, the Gospels that we have in the Bible. But these teachings are about awakening and liberation. They're not about adherence to a way of thinking. They are about awakening to the truth of who it is that we are. They shine light on our boxes, and they tell us, they mirror to us what it is that we are. And I want to share a few of them with you today. And as I'm sharing them with you, I would invite you to allow just a gentle shift within you so that you allow yourself to move outside of even your consciousness about just sitting in this room, but that we have a soul conversation. Because I feel that there is a lot of light within these teachings. Whether or not they were scribed by Thomas at the foot of Jesus, to me it's secondary. The mind would like to make up a box that, well, I don't know about the validity or the authenticity of these. But that's just the mind's doing. Allow yourself to just listen to these sayings. In the 77th saying, I am the light that is over all. I am the all. The all came forth out of me, and to me the all has come. It's interesting, in the Gospel of John, it is also reported that Jesus said, I of myself can do nothing. It is the Father within me that does the works. So there seems to be a very clear distinction here. I am the light that is over all. I am the all. The all came forth out of me, and to me the all has come. And then in John it says, I of myself can do nothing. So what is that saying to us? Charles Fillmore said from a book he wrote called Jesus Christ Heals, he said, we should clearly understand that the Christ, the spiritual man, spoke often through Jesus, and the natural man, Jesus, spoke on his own accord. So what that says to me is that there is basically two selves. Two selves that you and I are working with all the time in our lives. The small, vulnerable self. The personality, the brain-mind self that feels separate from God, that says, I of myself can do nothing. And then there is that part of us that we can call the Christ self, that we can call upon and we can invoke at any given time. That is the oversoul or the actual self that we can call on to invoke it down into ourselves. And when we say and when we pray the Lord's Prayer, that invocation is calling down that I am self into the body, into the mind, into the emotions. And it is the vehicle through which great healing, great transformation, it can overcome all fear, all doubt. And believe me, I call on it all the time, especially on a Sunday morning when I'm going to talk with you. Because my small self has a lot of fun with me when I'm standing up here sometimes, or I'm just about to. And I say, get thee behind me. You know that Satan is not some being. It is the small mind. Get thee behind me, Satan, means get out of my head. I'm going to re-identify myself with the actual nature of who and what I am. I am the light of the world, and so are you. When we come up against our fears and our challenges, what is required of us is a shift of identity from small self into actual self. That is how we move through our whole life. When we have people say to us, oh, you can't do that. What makes you think that you can do that? That's the small self. We are not that. You are part of God. And that's when I say we need to have a soul conversation. Because soul is that point that stands between the vertical and the horizontal of life. That part of us. That it is both human and divine. And we can claim it at any time to say, I am that I am. Nevertheless, I am. Someone has cancer, well, it's just a learning opportunity. Or if we have a challenge in our finances, we shift our identity into the truth and say, God is my source. I do not believe in scarcity thinking. I claim my good. Or my relationships are in harmony. This is the whole reason why we have these truth teachings. And it is, as we say in unity, omnipresent. Another one of the sayings says, split a piece of wood, I am there. Lift the stone and you will find me there. That is the omnipresence of the Spirit that is with us. In another saying, It says, his disciples said to him, the kingdom, on what day will it come? The answer is, it will not come by watching and waiting for it. They will not say, look here or look there. Rather, the kingdom of heaven is spread upon the earth. People do not see it. The kingdom of heaven is already spread upon the earth. It's already here. It's actually here in this sanctuary right now. If we focus in our hearts, we quiet our minds, and we allow this vibration of what is called the kingdom of heaven to show up right now, miraculous things can happen right now. How many people believe that? Do you really believe it, or is it just a concept? Why do you think in some churches and some faith traditions where they have what they call altar calls, and they have speaking in tongues and all of these things, it's really for the conscious mind to give up its position on the separation that God isn't present. But it's allowing the self to accept the divine experience of what we are. So seeing the kingdom of God requires a shift in perception. It's said that the Gospel of Thomas is based, half of it is based upon the Synoptic Gospels. Synoptic meaning same. Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The Gospel of John is a Gnostic gospel. Gnostic means knowing or to know. And unity is not necessarily a Gnostic teaching, but it certainly is focused on self-understanding, so that when we understand who we are, then we can let go of the false images that appear real. Paul even said it. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So, I go back and forth with what to teach sometimes here, because I really know that people need to be inspired, to have humor and fun during the service. But you know what? It's also my mission. I'm really clear about this. It's my sole mission and purpose to teach and to create an atmosphere where you and I see ourselves from a standpoint of soul and spirit and oneness. You're worth it, aren't you? You are the beloved of the Creator. You know, I see you that way. And I work with seeing myself that way. We are the beloved of the Creator. You deserve to be untethered from the challenges of your life situation, so that you thrive and that you live a life of joy and peace. Because someday, and not too far from now, I will not be in this body, and I will stand in front of my Creator, and I'll have a review of this life experience. And I want to be able to say that I did the best I could with helping all of us, including myself, to awaken to what it is that we are. To let go of these mass mind images of the world that pull us into limitation and smallness, and these thought images that promote us to be less than. This is the inertia of the world. This kind of baggage has been dragging people down and creating wars and famine and all this for thousands and thousands of years. It's time for us to rise up into the truth of what we are. You're worth it. All of humanity is worth it. You know, this coming week we're going to have the World Day of Prayer. I invite you to come, to hold space, to pray with humanity, to broadcast love for humanity. And in this next weekend, I'm going to be in Colorado because it's a spiritual workshop for a couple of days. It's all about fine-tuning this instrument so that this instrument can be, as Francis of Assisi said, make me an instrument for you, Lord. Make me an instrument. Each one of us in this room are an instrument. And if you have the little voice in the head that says, no, I'm not, you choose. You choose. In closing, I would just like to quote Emmett Fox. He wrote a book called The Sermon on the Mount that has been so valuable for those that are in 12-step programs and so forth, to let go of the false self and to claim the real. He says, you know, if we could only love enough, we'd be the most powerful person in the world. Love is the answer. That's what all this truth teaching is about, to uncover the false so that the actual self can shine through. Your homecoming work is to show more love. Wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, show more love. Thank you.